Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will call the Emergency Management Advisory Committee meeting to order. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the May 16th, 2023 Emergency Management Advisory Committee meeting be adopted as presented? Go ahead, Councillor Chenard. Thank you, Councillor Chenard. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the May 12th, 2023 Emergency Management Advisory Committee meeting be adopted as presented? Go ahead, Councillor Moore.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. And we will move on to wildfire emergency response updates. And CO Beveridge, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, we are going to have our DEM, Bob Beck, speak to the event as well. I will supplement as required, of course.
For those not aware, DEM means Director of Emergency Management.
Thanks, Daniel.
Welcome, Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've prepared a PowerPoint. Of course, everyone loves PowerPoints. I think it's important to remember, I'm presenting it tonight, but for the past couple of weeks, there's been a massive team effort going into this. And I think CO Beveridge will speak to that at the end of the presentation. But every time there's an action or an event listed here, a whole bunch of people worked on it. And I think it's important to remember that. So it really jumps right into a timeline to explain to the residents and council, EMAC, kind of how things progressed right from the start to today. May 1st, it really started with us opening the evacuation center to the residents of Evansburg, Entwistle, Lobstick Resort, and Wildwood. The center provided food, water, and lodging being provided through local hotels, and a number of counselors made their way through the reception center in the time it was open. May 2nd, the residents of Evansburg and Entwistle were able to return home. The evacuation center in Edson remained open for the remainder of the residents who were evacuated. May 3rd, the residents of Wildwood and Lobstick area were cleared to return to their homes. May 4th, the residents of all prior evacuated areas were once again evacuated to Edson, and which was at the Leisure Center. It's important to remember at this time this was not an Edson emergency. We were just assisting our neighbor and partner, Yellowhead County, with their emergency. On May 4th, in the evening, there was a helicopter crash at the Edson Airport. A NOTAM, which is a notice to aircraft, was issued for the airport advising that operations are limited because there was a helicopter crash. So things were rather dynamic at that time, and they got more dynamic. This was May 5th, the next morning, we were called to a meeting by wildfires, forestry, and they gave us a briefing on the fire that had spread, and we call it Fire 31, and we've got a few maps that we'll show you later on in the presentation to show how quickly it advanced, and so we'll show you that later in the presentation. Later on that, based on that briefing, and they said there's significant risk to us. Basically, that's what we were told. We did share that we had activated our emergency coordination center, as well as we instituted a water ban and power consumption, air quality information. So we were trying to communicate to the community the urgency of the situation and to be prepared and cut back on water use and power if you could. And we had a lot of winds that day as well, resulting in a lot of downed trees. We had to close the trail in behind from Wilshire to Edson Drive. That was pretty evident. We had trees down all around town that evening. Later on that day, on May 5th, working with the county, we decided to bring our two ECCs together. They already had theirs activated for their wildfires, of course. So they'd been active for a number of days, over a week already. We had not activated, we had just recently activated ours. And just through discussion between the CAOs and the DEMs, it made sense. Why don't we just join forces and see if we can work together on this? So we did. At 1400, there was no evacuation notice in place for the town of Edson. We did have some messaging outlining a risk to doing strenuous activities. Air quality in Edson was very high. The update also involved enacting more restrictions on the water bans, such as spray park was remained closed, all outdoor water use prohibited, bulk water hauling suspended, and other conservation measures as needed. At about 3 p.m., we joined up in the ECC. Later on that afternoon, at about a little after 4 o'clock, Mayor Zahara and CAO Beveridge were asked to sign a state of local emergency because of the briefing we had received from Forestry. Basically, the briefing that we had received, and we don't have access to those materials. We can't share that mapping with council. That's prepared for their own use. Was that the fire, if no weather conditions changed, would be on the border of Edson between 4 and 6 hours. And we thought that we would get a lot more notice than that. In previous briefings, we had asked, and the county had asked, we need a 12-hour notice at least to notify our residents to prepare, and then a 10-hour to evacuate. As it proceeded, when we met with them, they indicated that we no longer had that time frame. So we immediately, we agreed with the county. Both parties had to issue a notice of evacuation at 1700. So we had to work on the messaging, all the proper paperwork, and the evacuation notice was sent out. At approximately 6 p.m., residents of Edson and the evacuees that were in Edson were directed to travel west to Hinton and Jasper. This was really directed by the closure of the highways at the time. We had no other highways that were open. We couldn't contemplate going east. 32 was closed, so we couldn't go north. We had one direction to go, and it was west. We did reach out to Hinton and Jasper, and they were more than willing to help us. So they opened up the reception center at Dr. Duncan Murray Rec Center. As well, we split apart our ECC team, and I think I've got a note about that coming up at that time, and a bunch of our ECC staff went to Hinton to establish a backup ECC. We were that worried that this emergency coordination center could be inundated, and we needed a backup ECC. So we established one in Hinton. Between about 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., town staff coordinated busing of residents that required busing. That was a tough job. Same time, a bit of a longer time frame, town staff assisted with evacuation from Edson Hospital. Between 10 o'clock and midnight, town staff that assisted with evacuation finally left for Hinton and Jasper, and then they resumed work at that end to establish the backup ECC and assisting with the reception centers, which were really manned by Hinton staff and Jasper staff at that time. And then the rest of the remaining town staff continued working at the joint ECC with Yellowhead County in various capacities, from working the call center to coordination roles. So we had section chief roles, and I'll let CO Beveridge speak to that a little bit more, but basically at any one point in there in the ECC, a third of the staff probably would have been town staff. So, so on May 6th, we got notified that we had a new risk, and that was that the fire could be heading towards the substation that serves Hinton and Jasper, and it's located on Highway 47. It's just south of the Cascade plant. And there was a risk that if the fire, if conditions didn't change and the fire kept moving, that substation was at risk. And of course, that was relayed to Hinton and Jasper immediately. Same day, CEO Beveridge and Mayor Zahara and the CAO and Mayor of the county gave updates to the evacuees in Hinton and Jasper. The fire at that time was still out of control, but not moving as rapidly as the day before, based on just a change in the weather conditions. And it was confirmed to be about 14.6 kilometers from Edson. Just later that day, the government of Alberta declared a provincial state of emergency. The evacuees the next day were assured they could stay in Hinton and Jasper until further notice. There was a small amount of rain here locally. It did help. It didn't change the wildfire significantly from our reports. It was still classified as out of control. Same day, a little bit later, the evacuees were given an update on the fire. Although still out of control, it was not moving as significantly as the prior 2 days. The rain had helped, and the change in the wind had helped. It was not straight from the southeast at the speed that it was before. May 8th, Town of Edson residents and some Yellowhead County residents were invited back to Edson to their homes or to be welcomed back to the evacuation center at Edson and District Leisure Center. The Hinton Evacuation Center was closed, and all residents who were in the center were brought back by bus to either their homes in Edson or to the evacuation center. During the 9th and 10th, updates on the fires and readying residents from Yellowhead County to return home. Edson and Yellowhead County reentry booklet was distributed to residents. On May 11th, the evacuation center closed at Edson District Leisure Center. And just between that time, from then, May 12th, the state of local emergency was renewed by EMAC. And we'll just, after the next few slides, we'll give you an update what has happened subsequent to that. So this series of maps, this was not prepared by forestry. This was just prepared by us. And this is publicly available information, and the source is the NASA firm's site. I can't speak to its accuracy, but we used it to find out, basically it's infrared to tell us where the hotspots are in the fire. And whether or not it's accurate, I think it kind of shows how much it grew in a couple of days. So again, this was just prepared by us in-house. So take it with a grain of salt. So this is May 3rd, kind of before it really anything got moving. If you can see my cursor, we are about here. Okay, I can't really see, but right there. And this fire is the little red dot way to the southeast. So that's May 3rd. May 4th is a bit more of a fire. Significantly more of a fire. This next couple slides kind of tells you what we were looking at. So that's the next day. And the next day. So everyone was rightly concerned that this was heading straight into town, or close enough that we should be very worried. And then the wind changed and it kind of stabilized. Forestry was still very concerned the whole time about the potential for this to move north and into town or affect county residents, or to continue west and hit that substation. So they still considered it out of control. And so for the next number of days, the map doesn't change too much. And I think we missed one day there, but it really hadn't changed. But you can kind of see, really the important one was to see the dynamics between the 4th, 5th, and 6th. And Again, this is a heat signature and it's cumulative, so this maybe not be 100% accurate. Some of those spots later on might have actually not be red anymore because the fire might be out, but it shows the total extent. So current status, so we're still activated as an emergency coordination center. All the staff, all the section heads, everyone who has a role is still working on this as an active emergency. We get a briefing every day from the province regarding Fire 31, which is the big fire that threatens us. It's called Fire 31. And now Forestry calls it the Pembina Complex because it's merged with two other fires, two of which I believe are in Brazeau County and not our county. So they call it the Pembina Complex as one big fire. But it's really Fire 31 that's our threat. Edson Fire Chief Brad is in continual contact with YC Fire and Provincial Fire regarding fire status and planning. Almost every day. Edson ECC, we're continuing to work on an updated evacuation plan, business continuity plans and community protection. Not that they're imminent, but we have to have those plans ready. So we are working on them. And the current state of local emergency expires this Friday. And we can try to answer some questions, but I know CL Beveridge wants to speak to all the effort put on by the various team members.
Go ahead, CO Beveridge, and thank you for your presentation, Bob.
I'm happy to allow for questions if you like at this point in time before I get into the rest, if you'd like, if there's something that you want.
Okay, we will open the floor to questions. Council, do you have any questions for our Director of Emergency Management, Mr. Bob Beck? Go ahead, Councillor Beyer.
Thanks. Through the chair to Bob. Regarding staffing, how are the staff doing after going through all of this the evacuation and right from the get-go, where it was not our emergency to becoming our emergency and not quite expecting to be in that position?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through the committee. I think CEO Beveridge can also speak to this, but doing well, considering there were a lot of people that were really exhausted. I think there's a bit of sympathy that we see from our neighbors are still even more exhausted. And so, I think that the health of our staff has been, after coming out of this, has been one of our number one concerns, really. I mean, they carried... I'll let CEO Beveridge speak to that, but they put in a ton of effort. In spite of it, everyone's doing well.
Go ahead, CEO Beveridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to committee, given that there were staff that were involved from April 30th up until our event, which started on May 5th, and that was a handful. That was dealing with the reception center to assist our neighbors at their time of need. Our staff are doing incredibly well. I would say that through this period of time, I think this is why Mr. Beck refers this over to me, as that we've seen just continuous, spirits are high, we're still moving forward, we're still willing to help. And it has been incredible to watch this team through this event and continue that same optimism and support for helping this community and the region. So I have a lot to say this evening about it, but if there's I can go on if you like.
Well, I think we'll just continue with questions and then you can leave that for your wrap-up comments. Council, do you have any other further questions or concerns? I guess I don't know, it'll be through you, Mr. Beck, or to our fire chief, and I would also want to question our chief of police as well. Obviously we still have an ongoing emergency on our borders. The fire is still out of control. There's still a risk to our community, such as us renewing that state of local emergency earlier this week or late last week. What kind of resources were here during the evacuation to assist? What were they doing? And then I guess the other question is, has our fire department been deployed to assist the county at all through this emergency? I might want to hand that over to Chief Milton if he wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, we have not been deployed to the Yellowhead County area for support to them or any other area. Have we deployed any members? Currently, we do have a Type 2 structural protection trailer on site for us. Should it be needed for us to start activating structural protection on critical infrastructure and particular homes if need be. With that, we've had a number of departments that came to our aid, departments from Newell, Black Diamond, and from Vulcan that came up to our area, Chestermere as well, that sent a lot of trucks and a lot of manpower to assist us. When they were here, we were conducting structural triage for the entire town. What we've done with that, we have completed, I'm going to say about 75% of the homes of the 2,500 house points in town that have been completed by our evacuation zone map to ensure that we have that information ready to go should we need to activate structural protection. We also had a structural protection specialist that came up to the area that assisted us in that program, as well as the staging manager. So we had a lot of equipment and a lot of manpower here that came to our aid during that time.
And just to follow up, and I imagine those resources have been redeployed to areas that require that assistance now?
That is correct, Chair. With that equipment, we also had four other Type 2 trailers that arrived with another structural protection specialist to aid in running those groups. Things began to settle down for us, so at the point our risk had started to diminish. So there was no point in hogging with the current situation, having equipment on ground that wasn't needed at the time. So we did cut a lot of that equipment loose and send it to other fires, either in this area or to the north that were required by AEMA that divvied out that equipment. But we do maintain and we will be holding on to that Type 2 trailer for a while just to ensure that we have that protection here.
Thank you, Chief Milton. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Chair.
If I can ask maybe our Chief of Police, Staff Sergeant Dalal, during the evacuation, I know that there were concerns from the public regarding things such as looting and security within the community. I guess I'm asking you, did you see any widespread issues regarding that? And the evacuation itself, from your perspective, how did that go?
The evacuation went very well. The public was patient and flexible and really worked well with us. The major point was the traffic going west. You have like a whole town and some county residents all converging onto Highway 16 going west. That was a bit of a, traffic problem that we had to manage for a good 2.5 hours. But beside that, a couple of collisions in town. One very minor, another one, someone got injured. Beside that, in terms of evacuation, was then assisting some partner agencies like the hospital and whatnot that was left to do. So I want to say overall the plan that was prepared, that we put in action, worked well. Now, in terms of once the town was evacuated, maintaining security of properties in the area, it went well as well. There was not a lot of reports of any looting or crime being committed. Reported to us directly related to the evacuation. We were looking at about 3 break and enters from businesses, a couple of houses, a couple of sheds. That's about it. So not bad for considering the area that we had to cover and with the checkpoints and the patrols that we had to do inside the town of Edson. So. No, I want to say it went well.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Dalal. And what kind of resources were brought in? Because I know you had a lot of resources that came in.
I did. The RCMP did step up to the plate. When it was time to evacuate, we have, pretty much all my members that were available at the detachment were hands on deck helping. We had the support from about 12 members from outside of the detachment under the STO umbrella, the Special Tactical Operations. Traffic unit assisted. We had some sheriffs, Fish and Wildlife, CN Police. Like, we had plenty of resources to help us to evacuate. And then after that, maintaining those checkpoints and patrols within the town. So, yeah, in that, there was no problem in that department.
All right, thank you, Staff Sergeant Delisle. Council, do you have any other questions for either Staff Sergeant Delisle or Chief Milton or Mr. Beck? Go ahead, Councillor Moore.
Through the chair to Staff Sergeant Delisle. Do we have any idea if how many people decided not to evacuate in town?
No, because they knew that they had to evacuate, so they kept a low profile. We know that some people did stay. The exact number, I have no clue, unfortunately, no.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Chouinard.
Mine is directed to the fire chief. Just curious. Let's get up here. Just curious on some of the places that are more high treed in the town of Edson, you would probably get support from the forestry or the other fire ones?
The way the processes work here for the municipality of Edson is that anything within the municipal district of our footprint is our responsibility to fight an action. So that was the decision on myself in conjunction with the DEM and CAO Beverage, is to ensure that we had the equipment on ground that could assist us if that fire come into town. My concern for that was the fact that once the fire gets into a certain range, we'll start experiencing what's called ember brands. Ember brands are what is going to cause our structure ignition and start causing our bigger issues. We had that broken down into 3 task forces that were going to be doing roving patrols, or what we call bump and run tactics, to fix that. But if we would have needed help, forestry would have sent more help to us. But at the time, I know forestry was extremely tapped out for what they had. So.
Yeah, the only part of my question is like any of the high treed areas in town that if they did flare up, because you go by the high school and the trailer courts and stuff, if they would step up, because that is a concern. I'm very concerned at my property, and they did stop by, and that's why I'm curious. They gave me a plan. They said, if this happens, can we use your pond? And they explained the sprinklers. So I'm thinking, not only me, if we look at a lot of areas in town where it's highly treed, if we count on their support to, and I'm thinking like where the hospital and school is, if the trees hit, they could bring in, let's say, a water bomber, bomb the area to save the buildings.
Correct, and that is an option. We had a number of medium lift helicopters with buckets. We did have the water bombers and skimmers in town, so there was a possibility that if that was required, those actions could have been taken by wildfire to assist us if we would have started having some of our heavily populated areas with trees start to ignite. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Chouinard and Chief Milton. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Beck, probably on this one. This one's I'll say a difficult question. You present the timeline, and I completely understand the timeline, and I understand that the window of opportunity to put out an alert, there was no time. Things happened tremendously fast. The thing I've heard from residents is there were individuals earlier in the day, even schools, were beginning to create an evacuation plan, beginning to send people home and those types of things, when no official word had been given. I got text during the day. I wasn't in town that day. Is this true? Are we being evacuated? Those types of things. And I'm going, no, all official information goes to the town or county pages. So any indications about where people were getting this kind of information from, or again, this it wasn't official, right? And so that was the information I was giving. And again, I believe your timeline. I understand the decisions were made about when the words evacuation were used. It was very later in the day, well after school had ended. So just wondering your comments on that.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we were surprised when we were hearing that as well. It was certainly, we were not telling anybody at that point. We were expecting, like I said, a 12-hour heads up from wildfire that we should give an evacuation notice. And we hadn't had that yet, and people were talking about it. But if you remember back to the conditions that day, it was pretty scary outside. It was very scary outside, and people had already been evacuated from other parts of the county. So for other people to, I guess, assume that maybe evacuation was going to be necessary, I think that's probably just common sense. People of Edson are pretty common sense people. But there was certainly, we were surprised that conditions changed that fast. And we thought we would have had more notice than we would have to give to the residents.
All right, thank you. Council, do you have any other questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair, just a comment, and that's to the senior staff in terms of the ECC. And I know lots of decisions had to be made that day very quickly. And from the timeline that you explained and from what I understand, when these decisions happen, I know lots of people are involved, but there's always a nervousness. Are you making the right decision? And at the end of the day, no loss of life means you made the right decisions on the day, right? So, and with that, I know, later in the day, you were tasked with basically sending your families to evacuation, and then you having to stay behind. And you can say on paper, well, it's part of the job. That's easier said than done. And that takes its toll on you. And I know you said earlier your staff has been absolutely fantastic, and I believe that. I believe our staff has been absolutely fantastic. But I also just need to hear that time will be given to sort of recuperate. I know some days have been given. I know council, we only hire CO Beverage and ensuring that she takes the appropriate time, but looking at CO Beverage to ensure that the staff is taking the time to recuperate after this, because this takes its toll physically, mentally over the last few weeks. And you can say, yes, it's just part of the job, but this was an unprecedented event. So that's just my comments on that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any other further questions or comments before we go to CO Beverage? Just before we go to CO Beverage, thank you very much, Chief Milton. One of the other things I know that we have been dealing with post emergency or post evacuation, I should say, is residents that might be having some financial difficulties because of that evacuation. I guess, can you give us an update on some of the work that has been done and some of the questions that have been asked regarding the various agencies that we would expect to come to the table on these sorts of matters? CO Beverage.
Thank you very much. Yes, I most definitely can provide an update. I think that as soon as, I would say as early as Saturday, which is May 6th, I believe, those efforts started. And of course, starting at the elected officials level to speaking to the MLA, as well as, further up to the Premier. We shared some letters previously as far as to the Premier with regards to financial assistance for our residents. From that point in time, I know that, I can speak to my efforts as well as, I think, Mr. Mayor, you can probably speak, your additional efforts that you've made. But my efforts have been focused on ensuring that we have exhausted every possible angle as far as getting support for our residents when it comes to the potential of, if we were having to remove or empty the town again, if you will, to put another evacuation in order, would be fuel, as simple as that. The basic necessities to help people leave the community, because again, as Councillor Taylor mentioned, it's about people's safety, number one. That is the only thing that matters. And so through that, I've been in contact with Alberta municipalities. I've also been in contact with Alberta Municipal Affairs. So again, this is the bureaucrats, if you will, but there's also, making sure they understand the why and really understanding how this does affect. This may not, make a huge difference for, some individuals in our community, but for some individuals, this is everything. They don't have funds to evacuate our community and to travel anywhere. So the other aspect of it as well is even reaching out to the Oilers Entertainment Group to just help them understand that their 50-50 raffle, you know, essentially it speaks to that the Alberta evacuees are included there. We're not included in that, as far as I understand it, because it's through Red Cross. So we've been working. I know that Mr. Beck and his team from the Emergency Social Services end of it have been meeting and on the phone and accessing everything possible to try to get some help for our residents. This has been a tireless effort from basically the time, you know, as I speak to May 6th, and continues. We have not been successful so far, but that doesn't mean we're not going to be successful. I would say that we're continuing our efforts throughout this time. We're not through this emergency yet. I will note that. You know, we're making sure that we're talking to everyone that will listen.
All right, thank you, CO Beveridge. Before you go into your information and things you want to share, I do want to thank all of our town staff. It was absolutely incredible. I was at the EVAC Center, the reception center. Ms. Byers was there with the FCSS team and so many town staff, and Ryan was there and everybody. And when we went to Hinton, there was already staff there that were helping out. And from all walks of this organization, people stepped up. Thank you to our volunteer firefighters, ESTS, Beaupre Bus. There's so many, and I don't want to miss anybody, but and then the communities of Hinton and Jasper. It was remarkable to see that support in Parks Canada. So on behalf of council, I do want to thank every single member of our staff and our team and our community that stepped up to assist in this matter. So I'll hand things over to you, CO Beveridge.
Thank you. So, you know, really piecing this out as far as, of course, there's the emergency command center. Command center? Yes. The ECC group that we train for this, and essentially, you know that this is what we do. One of the things I do want to just touch on before I get into my a little bit more information is that it wasn't a hard decision, Councillor Taylor. This was the right decision, and I will stand up for this decision that was made with the group that made the decision. There was a multitude, as you mentioned, there's many agencies that were helping us make this decision, but this was the right decision for the town of Edson. As far as, you know, town staff, we had about 25 town staff that not only ECC, which, as I mentioned, that's our roles, as we have section chiefs, we've got planning, logistics, liaison officer, operations, finance, you know, there's a whole team that deal with that. But there's also the reception centers and also the call centers. So there were individuals that we pulled in to be able to, as we joined up with Yellowhead County, which is unprecedented for our region, and I think we've spoken about that. You know, at the evacuee centers, you know, essentially us together isn't something we've done before. We joined in that room with individuals that we didn't really know. I mean, essentially, I know some, and I know others, you know, may have a history because they've been, you know, in this community, but it was absolutely amazing to join together in the time of crisis and be able to find our groove very quickly. Everyone found their place, found a place that they could assist, and got down to work to support the residents for the region. So I cannot... I think the relationship that we have with Yellowhead County is I think we have a bond there. You know, I think I've been probably pretty emotional this last day or so when you start to come down from this and think about all the efforts and the groundwork that we've made with regards to how we prepare for emergency in the future. We're well beyond where we were 7 days ago, whichever. And then there's an incident management team that also supported Alberta Emergency Management Agency, Alberta Forestry, of course, Yellowhead County. They had their own ECC. We had support from the firefighters from across the province, support from RCMP from across the province, the town of Hinton, the municipality of Jasper. The list goes on, and you're right, you don't want to miss anyone, and we won't miss anyone when we do our formal thank you, because you know we've reached out and said thank you informally so far, but it's just incredible. And one of the things that I think that, you know, goes to show you the trust we hit a point because Yellowhead County was reaching their timeout. They needed to have a break, some of their ECC staff. I believe that happened on Monday and Tuesday this past week. Town of Edson staff assisted and took over the roles for Yellowhead County ECC. Incredible. Just, yeah, the trust and support there. Also, you know, remembering that we are still active, this isn't over, if you will, but the continued efforts through the calls. So seeing how the agencies are working together. So when we speak about ECC still being active, I wanted to touch on that a little bit about what this week looks like and trying to ramp up into operations as well as having an emergency. So we may be in this building, it may appear that everything is business as usual. It's not yet, and that's okay. But on these particular calls, we have a call at, started at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and we have Alberta Wildfire, BC Wildfire, US Wildfire, Fire Behavior Analysts. We have Yellowhead County ECC, Town of Edson ECC, as well as other municipalities on there. So we're joining together to get all the information at the same time. So we're efficient and effective with our information. So we're not hearing it third hand. This is incredible. To be able to ask questions to the individuals that are guiding this and protecting our community from these fires. So, and I also know that I believe that there's the Canada Task Force as well involved as well. So the supports we have from a week ago is just been, we've met some pretty incredible people, the people that come to help our community through this. I think we've made some some relationships, and I think that our team, our ECC team, and I'm going to touch on this heavily tonight, is we have grown so quickly as far as our knowledge base and skills and abilities and just the confidence that our group has. It's incredible. So I couldn't be prouder to lead this team. It's probably one of the harder things with this is that in this type of situation, I'm not in control. I'm your CAO still. We have a Director of Emergency Management, Bob Beck, that is in control of this. I'm a support, right? So I provide you information. I'm there for the community. I'm there for staff. I do, have my role, but that's been an interesting thing for me as well. So I just, absolutely taken back by the support from the community as well and the adherence to the evacuation order. And I do hope that if we get in a situation, because as we've been signaling through our communications out to the community and in our own organization, we still need to be prepared. So we're hopeful that they will still adhere to the order if that time comes, because it's not without information and facts from a whole team of individuals. It's not just the Town of Edson, CAO, and DEM sitting in a room deciding this. This is a massive undertaking that we don't take lightly to displace 8,400 people in our community. That's all.
All right, thank you very, very much, CEO Beveridge, and once again, thank you to the team for all your hard work, and Mr. Beck as well, who put your feet to the fire in 2 weeks. You've been DEM for 2 weeks, right? 4 days. Yeah, so perfect. All right, council, any other questions before we take a motion for adjournment? Well, hopefully the wildfire situation gets under more control. Big thank you once again to everyone and Alberta Forestry as well. They've been working hard and all the support staff. So with that, I will take a motion for adjournment. Councillor Chenard.
I'll make the motion for adjournment.
Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.